Welcome to Life Astrologer. I'm Anna Isabel, and with me today, I have the great pleasure of having Roy Gillett, who is the president of the Astrological Association of Great Britain. Welcome, Roy.
Hello.
And it's always, well, you're an astrologer. You know what a joy it is always to look at a chart you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So I was looking at yours, and the first thing that really jumped out at me was your north node so close to your ascendant in Sagittarius.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Because I feel that must be significant.
Yeah, it's always difficult to talk about your chart in a piecemeal way, because it all works together in integrated sense. It makes much more sense if you consider all the factors. But of course, when you've been looking at your chart as long as I have, it's very clear very immediate to you. But when I'm talking to people who are listening to this and probably never seen the chart, I don't know if you're going to show it to them. We can put it. I don't mind if you want to put it up, but there's a lot of other factors. Now, when we talk about the North Node on the ascendant, we're thinking about a very, particularly in Sagittarius, in the early degrees of Sagittarius, it's a very, the archer is shooting his arrows, and he is really projecting very expansively his personality. So that is very strong. But what you've got to realize also is, of course, the ascendant is going through the first degree of Sag, applying to a trine to Saturn, which is in 2 degrees of Aries in the fourth house. And that is being separated from by Mars, which is also in Aries in about 7 degrees. I'm doing it all from memory now. So you've got this incredible action focus in the chart to really point things very substantially, to be very active, to be very forceful, to be quite expansive in the way that I present myself to the world. So that's what that means, with a little bit of addition from the Aries. So it's more about being a pioneer, being an innovator, wanting to actually, well, always have this problem of being, how can I put it, ahead of my time. I mean, the sort of things that people are beginning to see as acceptable, things like climate change and even the change in the drug policy in America, all these kind of things. I was working with others to talk about 30 or 40 years ago, and it seems so weird and impossible then. And the things I'm talking about now, about a completely radical change in the way the economic system is organized. And you see the climate change demonstrations, but I'm thinking about mainstream, when all that's so obvious at some time in the future, and exactly how that could be the case. But of course, that's way ahead of what people feel comfortable with. So it's one of the frustrations of my life that I'm always trying to point to what seems obvious to me, but people aren't yet ready to hear it.
Well,
and that's, I guess, why I'm president of the Astrological Association, because that's where astrology is at the moment.
Well, this is the cross that being an Aquarius.
Yeah, well, we haven't mentioned that yet, of course, because to build it up, I mean, if you want me to talk about my chart expansively, there's 4 planets in Aquarius. Mercury is in a sextile to the ascendant at about 1-2 degrees of Aquarius. Jupiter is in the middle, about 11 degrees of Aquarius. The Sun and Venus are 20 to 22 degrees of Aquarius. And that Sun Venus is being trined by the Moon in Gemini, which is in the 7th house. So you've got a 2nd, 3rd house. It depends whether you're going to use Placidus or equal. But in Placidus, you've got a 2nd, 3rd house Aquarian focus of 4 planets, 4 strong planets. And the last 2, Sun and Venus, are being trined by the Moon in a Gemini in the 7th house. So you've got this incredible desire to communicate knowledge to other people, which is building with all that Sagittarius Aries stuff I was talking about. So I want to talk about the great future, the great possibilities, what astrology could do for you, things like that. And in fact, when I found astrology, it was wonderful, because before that, I was really floundering as to how I could present a revolution in a meaningful way.
I think just listening to you, it's an incredibly idealistic chart, isn't it?
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
fire, all
Yeah.
that air. And it is very much about ideas and education, but it's also about meaning, isn't it? Because, you know, it's such a strong Sagittarius. And I keep thinking about that North Node so close to your ascendant. And it feels very much like it was meant to be, that you would stumble onto something that offers some explanation for existence.
Yes. Yeah, because the interesting thing was that you know, I was born in a very ordinary, respectable way. I think in the sociological terms, in the way when I was at college and studied the psychology, the sociology of education, it classified, my parents were classified as respectable or traditional working class. In other words, they didn't really intrude very much on my schooling. I passed the 11 plus, but they didn't really worry too much. They were a bit proud, but they weren't pushing me in any way. As long as I was happy, that was all right. And you know, I was really uncertain as to what to dedicate my life to. I went through a very powerful relationship in my mid-teens, which sort of really almost aborted my education for a few years. And it wasn't until in my 20s I came back to education in a real sense, and then became a school teacher. And for many years, having worked in insurance in the city for a while. So, and in school teaching, I was in the spearhead of the changes that were happening in the 60s and early 70s, and the revolution in education, turning away from the old savage school teachers of the past, getting rid of the cane, making it more child-centered. And before we got any kind of real discipline into it. So I was again trying to get these new ideas and put these new ideas for education out until the mid-70s, when the Uranus and Pluto conjunction happened pretty close to my midheaven. And I learned about astrology.
Were you still teaching whilst you were learning astrology?
I came across astrology about 72. I was then had a senior position in a comprehensive school. I was a housemaster, and I carried on teaching for about 4 years, secretly looking at charts of kids, you know, seeing how they were. I couldn't find out the times of birth, but I knew the date of birth, and it was so helpful. You know, I mean, he takes the classic example was the most badly behaved child in the year that I was responsible for. You know, you think he was a really aggressive, nasty person, but when you looked at his chart, you see this powerful Cancer energy. He was so vulnerable, so sensitive, and so therefore, like a crab, defensive about a very soft center. And the opposite way to deal with him was to be aggressive. Because, you know, the crab, when you aggress, will cut his talons will take you. This is Cancer. They will defend the child. They will defend the mother interminably. And just by this child, this boy, it's an adolescent, I learned how Cancer works. And there's no Cancer in my chart. There's no water, really. I've only got Pluto in Cancer. That's all I've got. You know, everything else is air and fire, really, a little bit of earth. And, you know, that was happening for those 4 years, and I was getting more and more frustrated because I had all the techniques I'd learned taking my bachelor's degree in education, and yet I knew that astrology was far more useful in many ways than many of those techniques. But I dare not say. It's almost like like Oscar Wilde, and the secret does not bear it, the name cannot speak its name. You know, it had to be very, very, very careful how you did it. And in the end, it became to such a point that I had to choose between education. I mean, I was in a senior position. I could have become a headmaster within about 4 or 5 years, but I decided to devote my life to astrology instead. And that was in 1976. As I say, soon after the Uranus, in the 60s, the Uranus-Pluto came across my midheaven.
Well, I can certainly relate to your experience as a teacher, because I did exactly what you did when I was a teacher. And I used astrology to help my children as much as I could.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. And it's amazing how it happens. And how you come to recognize it. And particularly, I think just a tip to anybody who's beginning with astrology, if you want to really experience it in a living experience, is to just know your chart, have your birth chart, know a little bit about houses and planets and signs, and then follow the moon around your chart in the course of a month after month. Follow the moon, see how things change as the moon hits certain points on your chart through the month. And because it happens so regularly every month, you know, you'll soon get to know a pattern of where, you know, if it's got, like I've got a lot of planets in Aquarius, so when the moon's in Sag and on my ascendant it's quite active, then it goes dull for a while when Capricorn comes along, and then when it goes into Aquarius it's just ridiculous, everything starts happening, and then it works again. So I learned this very much. And then, of course, once you've followed the moon for a while, you start following the outer planets over the year, and you see how that happens, and particularly when the retrogrades emphasize certain points. And then, of course, you start working with the outer planets as well, the middle Jupiter and Saturn maybe, and put it all together. This is how you learn astrology works. I mean, the first 2 years after I gave up teaching, I married my second wife, and on our honeymoon, we did a 2-year journey from England to New Zealand overland. And I kept a diary of astrological details every day throughout that journey. And then noted what happened in terms of the transits that were going on at the time. And because parts of the world where it's very clear sky, you could actually watch the planets move and see the behavior of people as the planets change their positions, particularly the moon and Jupiter, or Venus and Mars. So that's how I learned astrology.
It's so true. The best way to live it, and to really be aware of what's happening to you, around you. That is the best way to do it, is to practice. That's what you're doing. You're practicing by observing, being
but
observed.
even play these games of when in Kathmandu, I think we decided I'm going to do the opposite of what I should do today. And we'd met this lovely couple. We had lovely time with them in another part of India, and we went off. We were on our own in Kathmandu, and we went on our bicycles and travelled around a bit and went to some temples, and it was all very horrible, and nobody was very friendly. And in the end, we came back feeling we'd wasted the day. And on the doorstep was some flowers and a note from these people who have said, well, we're just in Kathmandu, we're leaving this evening and we've come to see you, but unfortunately you're not here. So we did the opposite of what we should have done. And the result, we missed a very nice reunion with somebody, you know. So even doing the wrong thing, it shows astrology works, if you see what I mean.
Indeed, it does. Just looking at a few things, but I spotted Uranus sitting in your 5th as you were talking about your teacher as well.
Yeah.
So you were always going to have a different look or different perspective on children, and wanting to change things for them.
Yeah, we were really, education in the late 60s, early 70s was at a complete transition. I mean, me and a few associate progressive teachers were really trying to change, to find a new approach. I mean, I always felt that the school should be the centre of the community, and that all children should play a positive part in the community. It shouldn't be an academic sweatshop where kids either pass exams and are very good, or they fail and are just marking time until they can get away from it all, you know. It seems to me that everyone should be responsible for the fabric of the school, looking after it. It means a secondary school, why can't they do painting and decorating and gardening, you know, as well as the study? And also a high academic standard, but for kids who want to do it, who are motivated, not necessarily who are clever, but are motivated, so that, you know, if you really work hard, then you're going to do brilliantly, even if you're not as clever as some other kids, but you've got to want to do it. I mean, my experience was that so many school classes are with kids who didn't really want to be there, and the teacher didn't really want to be there either. You know, you're just marking time, and the kids who really wanted to be there were being held back by the kids who didn't. And you know, it seemed that we could reform everything, but of course this obsession with standards and qualifications and academic thing was going to come back in with a vengeance. And of course it did, after a hiatus of uncertainty in the 90s and in the noughties. It came back, and we got SATs and and examinations, and all the more cultural side of education has gone to the wind, really. And we're in a competition for some sort of economic success as a result of the way we educate our kids, which I think is exactly the opposite to what we really need. I feel very, very disappointed that we couldn't get the new ideas that we wanted to put in the 60s and 70s properly accepted. Society and education today might be very different, but that's a classic example of my chart talking, isn't it?
It certainly is. You know, you are very much a big picture person, and you know, looking at things as a whole, in terms of the emotional well-being of the child as being an integral part of education. And sadly, that is not exactly what's happening.
Well, it does happen in primary schools. Even now, today, it still happens in primary schools. I don't know if it really happens in any secondary schools anymore. I mean, maybe in the old-fashioned public school sense, but not in the normal schools. It's very much, what are the standards? How well have you done? What standards are the children up to in maths, English, arithmetic, maths, English, and whatever, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic, but how good are they in these, and science, of course, how good are they in these basic technical things that they're going to need in order to make our country better than any other country in the world? And really, I didn't know that we were born in order to work like mad and fight to compete with other people all over the world. I thought we were born to love each other and be with each other and do great creative things together. But that seems to take second place in the modern world, and it really disappoints me.
Well, as you say, that is very much you talking your chart.
Yeah, and I know. That's what you wanted.
Better explanation for your chart.
You want me to talk about economics as well? I just mentioned this. I always want to mention this one, that the economic theory at the moment is about GDP, which is you've got to keep on getting that number going up, and then there's enough wealth for everybody to live happily ever after. Of course, it's a complete fallacy, and it leads to ecological disaster. But there is a new system of economics that I think might well come in the next decade or so. It's by a lady called Kate Raworth, called Donut Economics. And anybody who's listening to this and doesn't know about it and is into new age ideas on economics, look out for a book called Donut Economics. And basically what she does is characterizes what we as a people need, as individuals, the kind of warmth and security, and what the planet needs, and says we have to find a relationship between the two that's complementary, rather than just trying to beat the planet and churn more and more for ourselves. I mean, the economic system at the moment is designed on something that was designed to colonize the world from Europe. And the world that we colonized is now trying to colonize us, and we're in an absolute mess. Sorry, I won't rattle on about economics anymore, but that's the stuff I'm looking at the moment.
Rattling on about economics is what you might expect somebody with Jupiter and Mercury in Aquarius in the second house to be doing.
In a square to Uranus in Taurus.
Yes, indeed.
My two rulers are squared to each other. So it's bound to be a struggle of change, isn't it? Of revolutionary change.
How are you finding your Uranus return?
Sorry, Uranus return. Yeah, just finished it.
Yes.
Just finished it. Yeah, it comes earlier than you think. You think it's every 84 years, but in fact it's a bit sooner than that. I'm 83 this year, but and it completed. I think it's complete, or does it complete in July? I'm just on the point of completing it all the same. I haven't looked recently to find out, but I've had a couple of hits. I think there might be one more. I'm not sure. I could check it up. Wait a minute.
What's been your experience of it? How have you experienced it?
I'm at the moment in the middle of for the last 20 odd years, I've been writing a column in the Astrological Journal, which is the magazine. It's a very beautiful magazine, actually. If people really want to see Astrology at its very best, the most beautifully created, because it's a full color magazine with incredibly appropriate illustrations. The Astrological Journal is published every 2 months by the Astrological Association. You just got to type Astrological Association and you can find out more about it. And I've been writing a column called Working with the Planets in that magazine for the last, well, since March 2002. So it's coming up to 21 years now. And I've gone through it and selected some of the key general stuff, not the, because I talked about each 2 months at a time, but it's more the putting it in the bigger picture bits in that column. And I put all those together in a book, and I'm just on the point of having that available. It's going to be called Working with the Planets, Better Understanding Clearer Decisions. Because I feel when you understand astrology, you make clearer decisions. And what it does, it shows what I've written about all the various things that have happened in the world in the last 20 years as they happened, and then compares some of the astrology, because I did it in terms of the astrology, to say, look, hey, if we had listened to that astrology, would it have been different than if we just went ahead on knee-jerk decision-making process, you know? So that, I'm just beginning to complete that. That's the Uranus return. Also writing a bit of a biography of my journeys, actual progress up to the turn of the century. I've done a bit of work on that, so I might bring out a biography. I suppose when you come to a thing like a Uranus return, when you're an Aquarian, you're likely to start thinking you should get all the focuses of your life in one place, so there's something left after you go, you know. It's a bit like that. But you know, I'm still thinking about the third Saturn return, which is in a few years, so I feel quite energetic at the moment.
I just wondered, because I mean, it seems like what you're doing is you're kind of consolidating your ideas, consolidating your work, and I think that's quite fitting for a Uranus return. Do you feel that as you've been reflecting and looking, that it's having a change on you? Because I'm just wondering about the Uranian change, whether you felt anything within you changing.
It's interesting. I mean, I've had this period from 1999 until now, and still continuing at the moment as president of the Astrological Association. It's been I mean, the Astrological Association in Britain holds the annual conference, which brings all the main astrologers together for a long weekend every year, and enabling this magazine that I've mentioned to be published, and other journals as well to be published, and making links with the world. And so, I mean, the focus of my book is not just about me, this latest book. I've written several other books, if you know, but this one, it's about astrology and the standing of astrology, not letting, and all the work I've done with the AA, all the journals that have been written since 1959 have been digitalized and are available online for people to subscribe and look at. So what I'm trying to do is to show the great achievements of astrology, because even if in my lifetime astrology won't be celebrated as a central core of understanding that complements all the other understandings, which it should be, at least we've got a record of where it could have been. This is what I'm trying to do. You know, this seems to be absolutely vital. It's a kind of revolution of the old man, if you like. You know, revolution. I want to leave enough of a revolution behind me so that it will actually cause change in the end. You know, it's that kind of feeling, I think, in my crazy mind, you know, that I'm doing. But I'm just trying to step back and answer your question, but I think that's what I'm doing.
Well, I love it. And you know, it couldn't be a more noble cause. You know, I can remember when I gave the when I spoke at the association, and it was all about the vitality of astrology in our modern world. And you know, what a lovely privilege it felt to be giving that talk, and what a wonderful thing it was to be able to outline the case for astrology as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Anna. I mean, it is. I mean, we are to a certain extent preaching to the choir. Although I don't know, having been a choir boy in my very younger days, I don't know if the choir should be preached to, because they're very naughty choir boys that I was any a member of. But so preaching to the converted is probably a better way of putting it. That we do tend to do that. We're desperately trying to find a way of talking to more people without seeing this as a kind of religion that people have got converted to. I think it's absolutely important that we don't let people see astrology as a belief system. It's a tool which any belief system can use as a kind of system of objectivity. If you have a Jupiter transit, you're going to get a lot of opportunity. Whether that be good or bad depends on the aspects. When you have a Saturn planet transit, you have to consolidate and so on. Knowing that is incredibly valuable, whether you're a Christian, an atheist, Brian Cox, Islam, Jewish, whatever, you can find it very useful to know these facts. It doesn't interfere with what you believe, but it does enhance what you do in your life. And it's so important. And therefore, I think this is something with the Uranus return, which is where it started this bit of the conversation. I want the revolution to continue. I want the change to happen. I want people to understand it and leave some tools behind. I mean, that said, we could all talk about some amazing people in our community who are doing advanced things that I can hardly grapple with. And people like Chris Brennan, for example, his work on Glennick astrology, and what Robert Hand's done over the years, and what the wonderful astrology programmers have done with Solar Fire and other programs like that. I could just keep on listing. People are doing great things. They're creating this incredible wealth of wisdom, which in the end, I hope people will begin to benefit from.
Well, I'm very hopeful. There are lots of people who have an interest, and I'm glad that I'm participating in carrying the flame, if you like. And it's part of that is the conversation we're having right here. And I was going to ask you about the Astrological Association, but you have, I think, already.
I slipped it in, didn't I?
Yeah. Beautifully. So I want to thank you, Roy Gillett, for speaking to us today.
It's a pleasure.
And you can hear more about Roy's work when you tune into the podcast, Lightways Astrology. And I'll make sure the link is there, along with the link to the Astrological Association, and also any other books that you want to look at of Roy's.
Yeah. And if you want to get in touch with me, just go to Crucial Astro Tools, or just type Crucial Astro in the search engine. It should get you to my website. And all my contact details are right at the bottom of every page if you look for contact. So you can contact me that way.
Thank you once again, Roy. And until next time, wishing you all a lovely evening.
Thank you.